Avram,
I didn't sleep now.
Avram, we are here to recollect and to reconnect. To connect the parents, my parents, Elchanan and Miriam Elkes, whom you knew, with the parents whom I remember. And I think we should perhaps begin by recalling the way I remember my parents briefly, and then give you the opportunity to tell us, all of us, how you saw them and how you experienced them. It is very important, I think, to establish this connection, because you are a witness, and I am only a witness once or twice removed. I have experienced it through your writings and in my imagination. You actually were there. And our object is, in this conversation, is to connect what I remember and what I knew with what you saw and you experienced. Does that seem a good way of going about this discussion?
Whatever you say.
Well,
You made a very nice introduction, and I'll follow you. So please start, and then I'll come in. I'll step in at the right moment.
I'll be very brief.
Yes.
I'll be very brief. As you know, we both grew up in Lithuania. You in Mariampol, I in Kovno. You and I went to Hebrew schools where everything was taught in Hebrew. A unique experience for both of us. My father helped to found the Gymnasion Ivri Kovna, which was known as Gymnasion Schwabe, through Moshe Schwabe, who later became the rector of the Hebrew University. And I'm just going to ramble along a little, because it will give you us both the feeling, or give whoever wants to see it, the feeling of our experience growing up in Lithuania at the time before World War II. The extraordinary experience of being educated in Hebrew about the world, not just about Judaism. I remember in my school being taught in Hebrew about Voltaire and Goethe by the same teacher, who taught me also Tanakh and Hebrew history. The same man was Voltaire on Tuesdays and was Yirmiyahu on Fridays. And Father had a lot to do with that kind of spirit and bringing this school into being. I remember my grandparents, Israel Meir and Sarah Elkes, my father's parents, living in a little shtetl in Kalvaria, where my father was born in 1879. And I remember Israel Meir, who was sitting in a little back of his shop reading the Talmud while he was selling herring and so on to the peasants, saying, "You want to know something about your father? I'll tell you. When he was 10, he was red-headed, and he started reading the Russian Encyclopedia, Volume 1, and simply went on reading." That's all they remember. Nobody knew where he got his first education. But what they did know is that he was an autodidact from beginning to end. He learned by himself. He was self-propelled. He went and studied medicine in Königsberg. How the hell he got, pardon the expression, got into medical school to this day, I do not know, with his qualifications, but he got in. And he studied medicine in Königsberg and then tutored Hebrew to make a living, to keep body and soul together, and there met Miriam Malbin, who became his wife, who was his pupil and became his wife. Then he returned and became an officer in the Russian army. And he traveled from Dvinsk and Minsk to the Urals and back again. But one thing I remember, Avram, which will keep it being, fit with what I think you are going to say about him, is this. He told me that in his regiment he was the only Jewish officer.
Right.
And there were always anti-Semites around, and there were anti-Semitic remarks made. And he is on record as saying, in my presence there will be no scurrilous remarks about my people. And getting up and walking out. And his fellow officers knew you do not engage in this kind of conversation in the presence of this man Elkes. You just don't take him on.
This is exactly what he told me while we were in ghetto.
He did.
About his service in the Tsarist army,
Yeah.
and they called him Žid.
Žid.
They didn't call him Žid. They just
Talked about Judy.
Židi, and the Jews should go out, they don't belong here. So he immediately said, I will never dine. It was in the dining room, in the mess room.
Yes.
So he said, he came to his officer, to his superior, and he said, I will never again step in this mess room because I don't want to hear such expressions. And to the greatest surprise of Dr. Elkes, his superior just ordered as Dr. Elkes said he would want to be.
Yes.
That the word, the Žid is not only a translation into Russian from the word Jew. Žid is much more than that. It's dehumanization,
Yes, yes.
degradation.
Yes,
you see.
yes.
Žid, it means everything bad.
Yes.
Whatever. Yes, and he spoke to me about it.
But that is really, in a sense, a presage of things to come.
Yes, of course.
Because that really is an instance
He
of the way.
told me about it in a context after his very serious and very dangerous conversation with one of the top people of the Gestapo in Kovno.
Yes, yes. Well, that is the connection which I want to make.
That's exactly.
Precisely it. And then, as you remember, he settled in Lithuania and rapidly became the leading physician of the town and the country. He helped to found the Jewish hospital, Bikur Cholim. He helped to found the Jewish school, a number of other institutions, but significantly, he refused to serve on committees, councils, anything.
Or parties.
Or parties of any kind. He was just very much a private person. And in this, his wife Miriam supported him. And I remember that ours was, myself, my sister Sarah's life, was a quiet life, was a very private life. Not many parties, not many official functions, nothing of the high life which usually accompanies the best physician in the country. Not at all. Very, very quiet and private and subdued, which is important in view of the fact that later on, when you came to know him, he took on such a huge public responsibility. He
didn't want it.
He didn't want it. We'll come to that in a moment.
Yes.
He didn't want it. He didn't, absolutely not.
Yes.
And then he became very well known as a physician, very well accepted by the whole diplomatic corps, the Russians, and the German ambassador, and the Swedish ambassador, and the British ambassador, and the American ambassador. They were all his patients.
And the Japanese consul.
And the Japanese consul, which you'll come to in a moment.
This will, yes.
They became very important too. And he became physician to the Prime Minister and his wife. And I remember one instance which again speaks to the same kind of characteristic. It was on a Saturday, and I answered the telephone. And on the telephone was the secretary of the wife of the Prime Minister,
Toubialis.
Tubilenia.
Mrs. Toubialis.
Miss
You
Toubialis
know
was
who is
his patient.
Toubialis.
Tubilenia. She was
Mrs.
Miss Tubialis.
Toubialis.
Miss Tubialis, yes. And then she came on the telephone, and I passed the telephone to father. And he said, this was a Saturday, Shabbat. He said, may I see you? And he said, Your Excellency, is it urgent? She said, it's not very urgent. And he said in his nice, polite, quiet way, he said, U меня sabota, it is my Sabbath. Perhaps we can meet tomorrow or the day after. Would that be convenient? And she said, I respect, thank you. I would be very glad to do that. But he stressed not only that he was not available, but U меня subota, it is my Sabbath. And unless it's very urgent, I prefer to see you when I'm working and not on my Sabbath. This is the kind of reserve and respect which he treated all his patients. And by contrast, I want to stress something else about him, because he was enormously generous in his services. His waiting room was always full of poor people, paupers, whom he saw for free, and mixed with some of the high society people who waited in the same waiting room. And there was never any give, take, there were any privileges. He was extraordinarily generous with his time. He made house calls continuously, again into poor homes, no compensation, just because he remembered that patient, that patient, that patient. So he had this enormous presence about him when he dealt with people who of standing, and a warmth and kindness which emanated from him when he was with patients, any patient, which became legendary, and which I'm sure Dr. Brown's father, who was his assistant, would comment to
In
me
the
about.
interior department of the Biko Holim Hospital,
And
of which your father was the head.
Yes, right. So these are some of the things which I recall so vividly about Dr. Elkes, the extraordinary sense of presence, generosity, kindness, and also a deep philosophical bent which viewed the Jewish ethic, which he lived and breathed, as the ethic of man. I can give you an instance of that. On his desk there stood a little tablet taken from the grave of Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant is buried, the great philosopher is buried in Königsberg. And on his grave there is a little tablet which is known as the Kant-Tafel, the Kant table. And it records a saying of Kant's which my father used to repeat to Sarah and me as he saw it. It was standing on his desk. And it goes, loosely translated, something like this. Two things continue to occupy the mind and fill it with ever-growing astonishment the more the mind occupies itself with them. One is the starry sky above me, and the other is the moral law within me. And Elchanan Elkes really lived these truths day by day. And in some way he combined them with the deepest sense of Jewish identity.
Because these emerged from his education. He got a very religious education at his time,
yes,
where was not Hebrew schools and not even modern schools.
right.
It was a cheder,
Cheder.
so-called, and a rebbe,
Right.
which if you didn't comply with what he gave you, also with a bite, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
with a kanchik, you
Yes,
call
yes,
it,
yes,
you
yes,
see.
yes.
But this is what was the very basic of his Jewish education,
Exactly.
and it kept with him all the years until the last day, I'm sure, the heritage, the Jewish heritage and Jewish morals.
Yes, Jewish
Jewish morals.
Yes.
Because he always spoke about it in the ghetto with me and even in the council. There is and when I'll talk about
Yes.
your father then in the
Yes.
ghetto, I'll come back to it. Why, in a very crucial day before the 28th of October,
Yes.
when the great selection of 10,000
Yes.
inmates from the ghetto were taken out, he didn't want to comply with the order of Gestapo that the Jewish Council should not publish, should order
Yes.
all the inmates of the ghetto, then approximately 30,000,
Yes.
to report on the
Yes.
28th of October at
Yes.
6 in the morning at
Yes.
at a certain square.
Yes. Yes.
And when the opinion doctores dividendum and
Yes,
the opinion of the members of the Jewish committee were different,
Yes.
he asked that the
Rabbi
chief rabbi,
Yes.
who was a
Shapiro.
great scholar of
Yes,
world
yes,
fame,
Yes.
was
Yes,
he was a candidate to be chief rabbi of Eretz Israel of
Yes,
Palestine
yes,
then,
yes.
to consult him on
Yes,
this
yes,
matter.
yes.
This stems all from the his Jewish
exactly.
religious education, which was deep and rooted in
Yes,
his
yes.
heart and mind.
Yes, and I really want to, I'm so glad you bring that out in this context, in your context, because that again makes the connection, which is the purpose of this conversation. The other and related aspect, growing, I mean, it's the same tree growing from a different root, is to him the reality, the day-to-day reality of Eretz Yisrael, long before the state existed.
Well,
That was to him a day-to-day reality in which he conveyed to us, his children, which he conveyed to the school which he took part.
well, this is why he was one of the three trustees
Yes.
of the pioneer farm. There were pioneer
Yes, I remember.
movements
Yes,
in
remember that.
Lithuania. And there were pioneer movements of the so-called socialist Zionists and general Zionists. He didn't care. But they bought a farm from a
I remember.
Lithuanian
Right.
in order to train those pioneers of the Zionist movements,
Right.
in order to train them in agricultural work, to be ripe for the life in pioneer life in Israel, in Eretz Israel.
In
Then,
days to come, in years
and
to come.
this was this was a non-political. It was a general farm of training. Achshara,
Yes.
in Ivrit, Achshara in English training.
Preparation.
Yeah, and this was near Kibarti.
Near Kibarti, and he and I stayed there.
Yeah.
And what is more, every Friday there was a chalutz for dinner with us.
Of course.
Every Friday, and the young people came to us, and my mother looked after them. And I remember these visits very, very well, and the tremendous enthusiasm which he had for this enterprise. You see, he, brought up in Calvaria, in a little town, he lived near farmers. He knew what a pumpkin and an onion and a potato looked and smelt like. I mean, he had dug it
Yes, but the main purpose is educating a new generation of Jews who were
Right.
mostly citizens of
Yes.
the citizens. They had no profession.
Yes.
They had no linkage to the farm, to land, to agriculture. And not only was he a trustee, I mean a public function, but he was also the physician
there, I remember.
of all the
That's
of
right,
all the
of-
Holocaust
of-
movement, and they were treated by him at his
Yes.
ambulatories
Yeah, yeah.
free of charge, no
Yes,
question
yes.
about it. But in serious cases, he used to go there to
That
them
is where I went
and
with
call
him.
them to on the spot and
Yes,
give
yes.
them to cure them.
Yes, 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 I remember that.
And
So-
this, bear in mind, is a physician of outstanding qualifications who was the physician of the prime minister, of the president of the state,
Yes.
of the ambassadors, as you said. But in first place, he was the physician of the Amcho,
Amcha, yes,
of the
precisely.
popular.
Yes, and they gave...
And I want to say another word. I was at his, there was a near Grodno Street, where, not before you went to Kestucho Street.
Yes, yes, we had the old apartment.
The old apartment.
Yes.
I was there because my father was ill and I was there. So you could always find a full packed. And not only, you see, now, people with very, as you said, well dressed, and people who came very,
Off the
very
street.
poorly, very
Yeah.
poorly.
Yes,
dressed.
yes, 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 yes.
And I want to say, not only Jews,
No.
Not only
No,
Jews.
no. He had...
because his door was open
Oh.
for every needy and for every man
Oh, yes.
or woman who needed and could not afford to pay.
Yes. Well, remember him very well. And then we're now coming to a time when he consulted I think it was the British ambassador, and said, "What shall I do for my son? He's getting up." He said, "You send him to England." I'd graduated from my school in Lithuania and the Hebrew school, and then for good measure I went to a German school in Königsberg, which turned out to be already, we're talking about 1930, 29, 30, which already was feeling the tremor of Nazism, and I felt it very much so. I was the only Jew in that event.
Yes.
And then he went to the British ambassador and said, well, do you think England's a possibility? And he said, yes, of course. And he wrote a letter, and that is how I went to England, and then where Sarah, my sister, followed me in 1937. And then he and I corresponded in magnificent Hebrew throughout the years. I went to the Zionist Congress, the one that you attended, in Basel.
In 39.
39.
Not, it was not in Basel.
No.
39 was in Geneva. Perhaps you were a Congress before.
The Congress before was
Oh, that's
in Basel. I remember it was in
This
Basel.
is in Basel. It
Yeah.
was the
Yes.
20th Congress.
The 20th.
I was at the 21st Congress, which was the last Zionist
This
Congress before the war. At the end, actually, the Congress were closed immediately because the Germans declared war against Poland.
In August 1st. August 1st, yeah.
August
1st, yes, 1939. Well, I saw him the last time in 1938. He had come and visited me in England, and Sarah had accompanied them. My parents came, and I saw him last time in 1938. And I still remember
36.
about 38.
38. Right.
Memel had just been occupied.
Yes.
And he had consulted the German ambassador, what is safe for me to travel through Germany, because I'd previously traveled through Sweden. And the German ambassador told him, never had our relations with Lithuania been better. It's so perfectly safe for your son to travel through Germany. And that is when I saw him last at the railway station, where my mother and I were seeing, my mother and he were seeing me off. And then, of course, there were letters again, and then the letters stopped. And the letter stopped at the time when there was the Russian occupation of Lithuania, where I heard only indirectly of his activities and the way he was handling the situation for his family and above all for his colleagues and himself. And you saw him at that time. You knew. I had already lost contact with him, 1938.
But then I started my contact.
That's
with
right.
him.
And this
so
is,
there is some continuation.
there is
nothing
entirely a
else.
continuity between, and this is really what I wanted by way of introduction, to bring it to the point where you saw him and I only learned about him through you and other friends, but mainly through you indirectly.
Yes.
So let me ask you now, when the Russians came, when and they were of course very suspicious of people who were well placed economically and well placed socially and so on, what can you recall of that period?
Well, first of all, the fate of your father would be much better than the fate of those Zionists and well-to-do Jews in Lithuania. They would have simply exiled him to Siberia. And in fact, they came to do so.
Yes.
They came to do so in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So when they came to take him from his home, he said that he wants to see the Soviet ambassador in Lithuania. This was entirely a very, very exceptional case, because the most of the Jews, when they came to Tokyo, didn't speak to them at all.
Yes.
Because they didn't have to say, they didn't have anything to call upon.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Elkes was the private doctor, physician of the Soviet ambassador, as of many other ambassadors. So he told them, wait a minute, I want to talk to the West, wait until the morning. They don't want to wait. So I said, if you don't want to wait, let me call them right now. And he called in the middle of the night to the Soviet ambassador. And this is thanks to his intervention. They didn't take him and his wife, like the thousands, right on the truck and go to the train center. And this is how he was rescued from the exile to Siberia,
Yes.
which was the fate of thousands of Jews,
Yes.
which was supposed to be my fate too, but I didn't like very much the idea of being exiled to Siberia. But this is what he told me when we were in the ghetto.
Yes.
But to the first encounter of me with Dr. Elkes was in when the order was published that Jews should be expelled, the expulsion of Jews from Kovno to the ghetto.
That was after the German occupation, after
the Soviet occupation lasted for 1 year.
Yes. Can you just fill that in?
June 40 to June 41.
Yes. And then on the
this
22nd of
I
June.
mentioned it is the exile because I followed you.
Yes, yeah.
But also, you see, Dr. Elkes told me not only about his danger, his being almost expelled.
Yes.
The same happened to the former Prime Minister of Lithuania, Merkys, who was the last Prime Minister of Lithuania, who was with great parade, with great esteem, was the guest of honor in Moscow several months ago.
Yes.
They tried to get his signature on an agreement according to which Lithuania asked the Soviet Union to be one of the 16 republics.
Yes.
And he didn't want to do it.
Yes.
So then when the Soviets occupied Lithuania with military bases, they came in
To
one
Merkis.
of those nights when they called upon your father's home. They
To-
called Merkis,
The Prime Minister.
the Prime Minister Merkis at his home, and he claimed he was very sick and he cannot cannot be shouldn't be moved from his bed. And they didn't listen to him, so he said, "Here, call my doctor." So he said, "Who is your doctor?" So he said, "Dr. Elkes is my doctor. I cannot move. If you take me from the bed, I'll die." So the secret police, NKVD at that time, went immediately to your father's home, and they took him out from his bed. They said, "The Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, is sick, very sick," and he didn't tell them what for they're taking him.
Mhm.
So he said, "Then cannot wait it until in the morning. It's the middle of the night. It's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. No, it's urgent. He's very sick. You must go." And they took him out from his bed, and they brought him to the apartment of the Prime Minister, and there, Dr. Elkes just gave me a picture
Yes,
of the scene that he witnessed.
please.
He came into the house, of course led by 3 secret police, and they find the Prime Minister in pajamas in his bed, and he cries out loud, "I'm sick, I'm going to die," and all kinds of
panic.
things. Yeah, and he jumps like a clown in
Like
the
clown.
bed.
Yeah.
So he went and says, so when the Prime Minister Merkis saw Elkes, he said, "Doctor, rescue me! They want to take me out of my bed. Rescue me! Tell them that I'm so sick." So the Dr. Elkes, in his very calm way, so he says, "Mr. Merkis, calm down, just a minute, I want to check you." And he said to the secret police, they didn't move from the room. So he said, "If I have to check my patient, you cannot stay in the room." So he said, "Under no circumstances. Under no circumstances, we have orders to take him." So Dr. Elke said, "You cannot take him in a way the man is sick. You can see the man is sick. I have to calm him down. I, as a physician, cannot take the responsibility. If I have to treat him, you have to leave the room, and I want to have a private checking of the Prime Minister, not because he's a Prime Minister, but as every patient. This is the alpha and omega of a physician." And I want to tell you, to the greatest surprise of Merkis himself, it made them respect him. This was the inner strength, moral strength. He speaks to intelligence, secret intelligence. This is the most degraded people you can ever meet under the heaven. And they had no way out, but they had to leave the room and leave him. And then he told him, "Look, Merkis, you cannot play around with these people. Tell me what do you feel? What is the trouble?" She said, "I just don't want to go. And you must help me." So keep quiet, speak quietly, because if they hear that, they'll arrest you, they'll arrest me. To cut a long story short, they came in. They couldn't wait as long as Dr. Elkes would invite them, because Dr. Elkes would not invite them at all. So they entered the room, and they said, Dr. Elkes told them, "Look, the man is sick. Can't wait for a couple of days, 2-3 days. I'll take care of him, and then you'll do whatever you think. Now we have orders. He must immediately.
Be deported.
No, he didn't say where, what.
Yeah.
He said, we must immediately take him under arrest. So he said, I as physician cannot allow to do so because he needs medical care of a physician. So they said, you come Smith, you come with us. So he said, I cannot go. I am head of the department in the hospital in Bikuchenim, and patients are waiting for me. I have a whole schedule for the morning, next day, and I cannot just leave the patient and so on. So he says, and besides, no, you go with us immediately. So I said, how can I go with you? I have to get dressed. And he said, you have to accompany him until the border with the Soviet Union, with Russia. So he said, if I have to go, I have to get dressed. So they took him back to his apartment, and they took it was
a heavy coat,
and some medicines. I don't know what it is.
And he accompanied the prime minister to the border.
No, and they took the prime minister, and they wrapped him in the in the blankets and with the pajamas. They bound him like a rope with ropes. You see, like you take a bundle.
Yes.
A bundle of clothes or
and
something.
And Dr. Elkes traveled with him.
And they threw him into their car, and Dr. Elkes aside of him, and they came to the train, and there was a special coupe, a special compartment, where it was for the Prime Minister and for Dr. Elkes, and they said, Doctor, you are responsible for this Berkis, that he shouldn't jump out of through the window. So I said, can only take care of him as a physician. I have no idea, and I have no tools and ways to safeguard him what he will do. So this is your duty, actually. You are the security people. You are the main people of security. And then this is how we went all the night long until they came to the frontier, and then they let him off, and he could come back. Well, that again is what he told me when we were in the ghetto. Because in the ghetto it was not only a relationship. Started, of course, formal when he was elected. I'll say a word about it later.
You must.
So later, but it developed a very, very close personal relationship that I never before experienced in all my young life that time. Because after all, Dr. Elkes was a man of over 60, and I was a young man, a sportsman, Maccabi, and student fraternities and whatnot. And nevertheless, it developed such a relationship that we used to go out in a leisure time, or I should accompany him from the offices of the Jewish Committee to his tiny dwelling. Yes. And this, he told me various stories.
So come back now, Avram, to the time when you met him after the the first days of the Nazi occupation.
Yes.
Come back to that.
Well, I made an aborted attempt to escape, to run away from the Kovno and from Lithuania.
This is
on a bicycle, immediately on the 23rd.
On the 23rd of June.
On the 22nd.
The second they came.
On the 22nd, the war broke out. I was waiting at my sister's home for a wagon to take us, and it didn't come until 2:30. This is how I started to make my first entry about
that was the historic day on which you started the diary. In the evening, on the midnight of the
22nd to the 23rd. I was waiting for a wagon to come and pick me up with my sister.
That's when you started to...
And I was so much impressed of the bombardment, of the fire that was all around Kovno, and of the first already Lithuanian fascists
Yes.
jumping out from various parts of the city. So I was overwhelmed,
Yes.
and I couldn't help it, but I took the first sheet of paper that was on
And
the
you
table of
start writing.
Professor, and I wrote.
In
I
your-
have it with me.
In your brother-in-law's home.
My
But the-
sisters,
my sisters
my
home,
older
yeah, yeah,
sister
yeah.
Batya, my older sister Batya, she was to be like, I was the youngest and she was the oldest.
Yes.
She never allowed me, when I studied in Covenant University, the law school, she never allowed me to live somewhere else to take a room. I had to live with her.
Yes.
And her husband, fortunately, was so attached to me, we were like brothers.
Yes.
You see? He was not a Zionist at all. He was a left wing.
Yeah.
He was from the Yiddishist folk.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
see. But this is another
But
matter.
you
And that
start-
night I
you started a diary.
the diary, and I wrote 4 pages.
4 pages.
And this was,
was the first entry.
The first
That's the entry of the diary, which you finished
And then I
2 and 3 quarters
then I
years.
couldn't already stop it.
Yeah, and then of course it went on for 2
So
years.
I escaped from the town.
Yes, and then you came back.
Unfortunately, and I couldn't go far, but about 100 kilometers on a bicycle, of
Yes,
course.
yes.
And when I came back, it was a terrible thing.
Yes.
And then I heard that at the house of the chief rabbi, they are gathering the leaders of the Jewish community. And I was always, had an interest in life of the students, in the youth movement,
Yes.
sports movement. So I went there to listen what's going on. And then when the Germans, a committee a Jewish committee was formed
To transfer,
to arrange for the transfer of the regular, normal, as far as possible, transfer from the Jews from Kovno to the ghetto.
Yes.
And then there was the order in the 1st of August, I think.
Yes.
It was ordered that the Jews should nominate
Yeah.
an over Jude.
But,
It was a chief-
let me track back. You met your father then. I mean, we'll come to the Assefa in a moment.
Yes,
To the meeting.
but this was after the Sefer.